Ever wonder what would have happened if Shinji were not dealing with a deep depression by the events of the end of Evangelion? What if Shinji were ready to fight in his EVA when the GSSDF invaded NERV? Ever wonder if Asuka, instead of being guarded by the mass-produced EVAs, was being offered to the Altar of Light to begin instrumentality? What if Shinji would have fought and defeated those Seals EVAs and saved Asuka from dying? And what about the aftermath? How the world would look like? What would happen to NERV? What would have happened to all of our beloved characters? Neon Genesis Evangelion ANIMA answers those questions. Set on a post-instrumentality world, the author Ikuto Yamashita tells the story of Shinji, Asuka, Rei, Misato, and Toji, on what it seems to be an angel-free world. This is the direct sequel to The End of Evangelion. Presented in a light novel format, Yamashita's work was first published in 2008 by the magazine Dengeki Hobby, and the last story was published in 2013. All of the 5 volumes of the novel are already available in Japanese, and many fans' translated versions can be found on the web. But it wasn't until summer 2019 that the first volume got an official English translation by 7 Seas Entertainment. By time of posting, there are already 4 volumes available in big outlets like Amazon, and pre-orders already exist for the final volume, that is number 5, set to be released by early summer 2021. But is this a canonized story, you may ask? Well, depends on how you see it. Do you consider Sadamoto's manga canon? The Rebuild Tetralogy? How about Project? The video games? Or even that horrible Petit Days thing? If you consider that anything made by Anon is canon, then Anima is not canon, because it wasn't made by him. Only Neon Genesis Evangelion, The End of Evangelion, and the Rebuild Tetralogy were made and supervised by Hideki Anno. Nevertheless, if you consider anything that has the blessing from Anno himself to be sort of canon, like Sadamoto's manga for instance, then yes, Anima is kind of canon in the Evangelion universe. Ikuto Yamashita himself recognizes this. After the end of Evangelion, Anno approached to him and asked him to write a spin-off story, like those of Gundam. Then it can be considered that Anno commissioned this story to Yamashita. Not only that, but Yamashita also recognizes that he took some of the discarded concepts from the Rebuild Tetralogy to put it into his novel. Thus, by reading the novel, you will learn other ideas that Kara and Anno himself had during the development of the films. Furthermore, Yamashita expands the lore on how the Evangelion units, the angels, and many other assets that appears on other presentations actually works, including engineering concepts, quantum mechanics, and physics. Does it feel like an Evangelion story though, like Rebuild? The answer to that question depends on what you like about Evangelion. Do you like the human interactions, the mecha aspects of the story, or you are just in for the Freudian part of it? Yamashita's storytelling technique is different from Anno's. And remember, this is not a visual story, although there is available in Japanese a visual storybook. This is a light novel, easy to read and digest, mostly. Ikuto Yamashita is the lead designer for anything related mecha on the Evangelion stories, from the Jet Alone to the EVAs in Rebuild. Most of those concepts came directly from him. So he is a mecha designer telling a story from a mecha designer perspective. Sometimes you can feel the passion on his work by reading some of the lines. How much he loves Unit 2 design, for example. Or how armor should be believable and elegant. Anima can be defined in its simplest form as a mecha fan fest. Nevertheless, the story also adds human interactions, as never told before, as Yamashita's story is set 3 years after the events of the end of Evangelion. Well, not all of the end of Evangelion, but what is known as the NERV Battle. There is no Course of Eva in Anima. Those our characters are now 17 years old, and they have grown physically. The reader can experience how Asuka and Shinji have matured on their own ways, and how their relationship has evolved, what NERV's new role in the world is, and how humanity sees the organization after instrumentality was aborted. It's a story filled up with emotions and also psychology, as that aspect of Freudian drama is still present throughout it. But it is true that all of these aspects are demoted on the role against to those mecha-driven, as the Evangelion units are the true main characters of this story. The world is believable, and it feels that you are still on the TV storyline. Many of its main characters make a comeback, and also new ones are introduced. A new foe, situations, everything that an original Evangelion story should have. But is it for you? If you are an anime fan that only likes anime and manga, then I would say that anima is not for you. However, if you're a hardcore Evangelion fan and are in need to scratch that EVA fan niche, then anima is the story you should read, or at least try. So I spent several minutes talking about the concept of the story and the history behind it. But what about its premise? What is this story about? Alright then, I will give you the premise of it without digging deeper and thus avoiding the big reveals and spoilers. So here is a brief overview to the premise of the story. 3 years has passed since the NERV Battle, and many things have changed. Tokyo 3 is now an independent city from the Japanese government, and this was leased by the United Nations. NERV still exists, but Gendo Ikari and Dr. Akagi have disappeared after the battle, and their whereabouts are unknown. Koso Fujitsuki has resigned from his post, and now Misato, or should I say Commander Katsuragi, is in total control of NERV's operations, who is now known as NERV Japan, whose role is to direct a worldwide strategic anti-angel defense. No angels have attacked since Kaoru, but humanity still needs to be prepared in case angels attack again. Rei 3, who is now known as Rei 3, accepts to lead a group of other 3 Ayanami clones, known as 4, 5, and 6. How about that French? These 3 Reis are extensions from Rei 3, which means that she can communicate with them telepathically. They all speak, behave, and talk like the original Rei Ayanami. They have some physical differences though. One of them is taller, another a child, but all of them are still the same old Rei. 3 new Evangelion units are assembled, and all of them with the designation 0.0 for these 3 Reis. All of these EVAs have their own external S2 engine, and are sent to space. From the Earth orbit, these Reis will have the role to defend humanity and any threat from angels. Rei's original Unit 0 survived the story, and is readjusted to be a sniper. One of its arms is replaced by a Gamma Ray cannon, so she's still an Evangelion pilot. Shinji and Asuka relationship have improved a lot, and even though at the beginning of the story Asuka is still our beloved tsundere, she's also grateful to Shinji for saving her life, so they get along quite well. And yes, Tokyo 3 favorite family still lives together. Asuka is taller and has developed some dangerous curves, let's say. Shinji is now a bit more muscular and has a ponytail like Kaji. Both of these characters have matured and now they are mentally stronger. Both of their EVAs have been upgraded with new armors, and although Unit 2 looks mostly the same, even if its armor is different, Unit 1 Type F armor gives a new look to Shinji's EVA unit. Plus, for all you hardcore Toji fans, he is back, and takes a primordial role in the story, so watch out for that. The story really kicks off when one of the Reis in orbit goes rogue, and decides to come back to Earth on her EVA Unit 0.0. And that is, my friends, when Anima story begins. Evangelion Anima is a poem to all mecha lovers, and those EVA fans that simply cannot get enough of these stories. It's one of the proofs that after reveal concludes, there are still many stories that can be told, even without Hideki Anno's direct involvement. I don't know if sometime in the future, Yamashita's light novel will get a chance to become an anime adaptation, a spin-off of a story that still feels pretty much like the original, which is already made, and overall has been well received by fans. and unlike Sadamoto's manga, which is a retelling and many times used to close plot holes to the original story, Anima presents a different resolution to the events from the end of Evangelion. Only the support of the fandom can make it a reality, as many of our beloved anime stories started as light novels. So, what do you think about Anima? Have you read Yamashita's light novel yet? Did you like them? Or you are just going to take a pass on it? Let me know in the comment sections down below. Remember to like the video if you did, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, join my Discord. The free link is in the description section down below. Guys, thank you all so much for watching, and as always I wish you all a wonderful day.